Did you hear me? I have cancer. Morgan Shaw repeated the dreaded words to her boyfriend Jason, who sat beside her on the sticky metal bench. From the look on his face, she supposed the middle of San Diego's crowded annual Tall Ship Festival was not the best place to convey the horrid news. She'd been trying to tell him for 2 weeks, but he'd always been too busy with his job tending bar, too distracted with memorizing lines for one of his many auditions, or just too plain drunk. No doubt the condition he'd soon be in if he didn't stop gulping down the mojito he held so fondly in his hands. He took another swig and stared at her again, his baby blues pools of shock and dismay. Not sorrow, not horror, not even concern. He squeezed the plastic cup holding his precious alcohol. It made a crackling sound even above the chatter and buzz of people passing by, the lap of waves, and the bells ringing from boats in San Diego Bay.
Are you going to die?
He finally asked, pressing fingers to his perfectly moussed dark hair while nodding at an attractive woman who smiled at him as she passed by. A sharp pain stabbed Morgan at his callous tone. Even the doctor had been more tactful. Hepatocellular carcinoma, he had said. Liver cancer. Stage 3C. With chemo and radiation, she had a good chance of surviving, but she'd spotted the pity in his eyes. And when she arrived home, the internet provided the true survival rate. Less than 30%. Everyone's going to die, she returned, shifting out of the hot sun.
Are you going to have to go through chemo and lose your hair?
He studied her as if assessing how ugly she would be. Maybe. She dabbed the perspiration on her neck. Yes, I guess. I go for my first session on Tuesday. Why, oh why, had she allowed him to talk her into coming to this stupid festival? She hated these old boats anyway, and she didn't much care for the sea either. Last year, when she'd gone whale watching, she'd spent the entire 4 hours puking her guts over the side of the boat. But Jason loved historical sailing boats and had bought tickets to this weekend event 2 months in advance. So, they'd grabbed Morgan's roommate, Tiffany, and her boyfriend, Brad, and made a day of it. Speaking of, where was Tiffany anyway? She and Brad had gone off to the nearest bar for takeout drinks 40 minutes ago. Though her roommate's cheerleader-type exuberance normally grated on Morgan, she sure could use her help now with Jason, if only to untie the knot of tension forming between them. By the way he was chewing his lip and glancing around, Morgan thought he might bolt. She'd expected shock. She'd expected it would take time for the news to sink in. But she'd also expected a speck of care, of concern, and perhaps even a willingness to help. After all, they'd been dating for nearly 6 months now. She still had to pinch herself to believe that the coolest, best-looking guy in San Diego had chosen her. Plain, nerdy, control freak Morgan. He'd said he'd grown tired of the model types and wanted a woman with intellect, someone like her, the lead software engineer at Qualcomm Holographic Industries. Morgan couldn't have been more thrilled. Jason was good-looking, smart, and going places. He had a way about him that made her feel special, cherished, something she'd never felt before. Yes, being his girlfriend definitely hiked her confidence up a notch and made it worth dealing with some not-so-pleasant aspects of their relationship, as in not seeing him the past 2 weeks, due to his job at the Flux, and his insistence that flirting with patrons was just part of his job.
How can you expect other women not to notice my good looks?
He had said to her. Those good looks, along with his talent, were going to make him a fortune when Hollywood discovered him, and she'd be right by his side when that happened. Or so he said. Yet as he gulped down the rest of his mojito and avoided her eyes, Morgan feared his promises were as fleeting as the hot wind blasting over her. A man dressed like a pirate walked by and winked at her. Across the popcorn-strewn path, a vendor selling cotton candy handed a sticky pink glob to a small boy, who immediately dove in with his entire face, much to his mother's dismay. Behind Morgan, the creak of an old boat,